Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, September the 6th. And welcome to our commentary. Of course, if it's September and Saturday, it's college football. And today there's a bunch of games. You've got the Aggies are playing, the Longhorns are playing. So everybody's playing. And then tonight, to wrap it up, you have the Rangers in Houston. And these Rangers have turned this season around. A few weeks ago, it seemed like it was over, like the season was over, that there was nothing to play for. And, they have devastating injuries to their star players. And incredibly, these young guys who've come up through the system are literally carrying this team and turning this season around. They're now only a half a game behind Seattle for the wild card. They're only 4 games behind Houston for the American League West. So all of that is certainly achievable with the 20 or something games that they have left. So there's plenty of time. So this is going to be a wonderful, or it can be a wonderful September for baseball fans. And just a few weeks ago, as I say, there was no hope, absolutely no hope of that. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this Rangers team of, frankly, a bunch of players that nobody knew. I mean, if I had said to you in September or in March or in spring training that these were the guys who were going to be carrying the team in September, nobody would have believed it. But here we are. Here we are. And it's just remarkable. I think it was Eric Nadel, who does their games on the radio, who said this is the season of the improbable. And so far, it may very well be. I mean, it's just a lot of fun when you see a team of guys that nobody knew anything about, and these guys are now competing for the postseason. I mean, it's just an absolutely fun thing to watch, to say the least. Well, I've got a post over at the American Thinker today talking about this Alligator Alcatraz, and apparently it's back on, which is a good thing. There was a judge that had tried to stop it using environmental violations or something, which is kind of weird because that particular facility has been there for a long time. Now, all of a sudden, there's environmental problems. So I don't know. I always had the feeling that was kind of an excuse to not talk about the immigration issue. But here we are. It's open again, and it'll go back to business to process, people who are waiting to be deported. And I'm glad that it's back in business. I mean, this is why you have these deportation places, so that you can take people and deport them, put them in a plane and send them to another country. So I'm glad that it's open. Well, the big story for me this week is Secretary Rubio in Mexico and then Ecuador. And let's talk about Ecuador first. Ecuador is a small country in South America, a country that has been significantly impacted by the narco-traffic problem, and a country that really needs our help. They also have a very young, exciting new president who I believe is doing a good job, and he needs our help. And I thought it was fantastic when Secretary Rubio was having a press conference, I guess, with the foreign minister of Ecuador. And some reporter asked about the United Nations questioning this military operation where we sank or blew up a ship, not really a ship, I guess it was more like a yacht or a boat or whatever. And they asked him, the UN, I guess, was questioning, whether or not these were terrorists or whether or not Venezuela had connections to terrorism or narco-terrorism. And Rubio came back. Absolutely great line. He said, look, I don't care what the UN says. They don't know what they're talking about. And that was such a great line to hear a Secretary of State of the United States basically say that. We need to say stuff like that because the reality is that the UN does not always know what they're talking about. And in this particular case, I don't think they do. I think the evidence that Venezuela has been involved in narco-terrorism is pretty clear. And so I was just so happy to see Rubio respond like that. Now, the trip to Mexico was more interesting because on the surface, it seems awfully diplomatic and everybody was very nice. But there's a lot of concern in Mexico as to what exactly was negotiated. And there's a sense in Mexico, and I've never seen this before, more and more politicians in Mexico are bringing up the potential connection between narco and the government. And this is something that, for years, nobody wanted to say this, but now a lot of people are saying it, particularly in the opposition, and they're saying it. And there's a sense that information, at least this is what I'm picking up from just watching these or listening to these podcasts from Mexico or watching some interviews that I've seen. There's a sense that Secretary Rubio gave President Sheinbaum a list of people who are involved, or we have evidence that they are involved in the narco business. This list of people apparently came from this fellow up here, El Mayo, who cut a deal with the United States to release a bunch of information. He's going to be going to jail, from what I understand. And there's this sense in Mexico that the United States is putting a lot of pressure on the Mexican government to give up some big names, not just these people they've sent to us, but some big names. And some of those big names, there's a lot of speculation as to who they are, but it is believed that some of these big names could be politicians, business people, and people very close to the administration of President Sheinbaum. And this is what I'm picking up from the Mexican media. This is not what I'm picking up from the United States or Secretary Rubio. In fact, Rubio has been pretty diplomatic about everything. But this is what I'm picking up from listening to podcasts and videocasts. So I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going on south of the border, but something is going on. And by the way, speaking of that, on Sunday night, we're going to be chatting with our friend Alan Wall, who follows Mexico quite closely, and he'll be giving us a report. We'll be talking about this exactly. What did Secretary Rubio and President Sheinbaum talk about, if not directly when they were talking in private? What has been discussed between the two delegations? Remember that a lot of this stuff has been negotiated off the record. In other words, a lot of these negotiations were happening before Rubio went to Mexico, and I'm sure they're going on right now. But it'll be interesting to see when Secretary Rubio actually sits down with President Trump, and I assume that's going to happen pretty soon. And let's see what the policy of the United States is going to be. I think that what you're seeing here is, Trump is going to be the bad cop, and Rubio is going to be the good cop. And that's probably the way this is going to play out. So we'll see how President Trump responds to whatever was discussed. There is a 90-day extension that was made to the tariffs and the commercial negotiations. There's also a lot of discussion about the free trade agreement. That comes up for negotiation in 2026. And there's a lot of concern in the United States about China in Mexico. So all these things are up in the air. And then on top of that, you have horrific violence in certain parts of Mexico, whether it's Sinaloa and other parts. So the whole thing is fascinating because it leads to a lot of speculation, obviously, and there is a lot of speculation going on in Mexico. We'll probably get a better sense of all of this. That is, we'll get a better sense of what the American policy is going to be after President Trump visits directly with Secretary Rubio and some kind of a statement is made. But very interesting times right now between the U.S. and Mexico, to say the least. Well, let me take you back on this day in history, 1995. This was the day that Cal Ripken broke the incredible consecutive game streak that Lou Gehrig had set many, many years before. I think it was in the late 30s when Lou Gehrig did it, before he, of course, had to leave the game for medical reasons. And it was on this day in 1995 that Cal Ripken played in game number 2,131. I always have to look that up. 2,131 to break the record of 2,130. It is really one of the most incredible records in sports because 2,131 games is the equivalent of 13 baseball seasons. So from 1982 to 1995, basically, Cal Ripken didn't miss a game. And what's fascinating about those 13 years is that, with few exceptions, most of the time, the Orioles were not in contention. They were in 83 and to some extent in 86, but there was a period there, 87 to really the mid 90s, when they were just playing for nothing. And yet Cal Ripken was out there every single day, not only playing every inning, but playing every game. And, this went on for quite some time, 13 years. And that's what makes this remarkable. Not just the fact that he did it, but the fact that he was doing it at a time when most of the games that he was playing were not meaningful games at all because the team was not in contention. So I have always regarded this to be an incredible record, probably not going to be broken, for the simple reason that nobody's going to play that many games now. I mean, I just don't think that that's going to be done. I mean, a couple of guys have reached 700 or 800 games, and then, they stop. So the idea that somebody's going to play 2,130 games like Gehrig did, or 2,131, actually more than that, because I think Ripken went on for several more years to continue the streak. I just don't see that happening for a lot of reasons. Injuries, of course, is the main reason. I mean, you have to be lucky in a way to play that many years like Ripken did, playing shortstop, which is a position where, you can have back injuries pretty easily. You can play that many seasons without injury. I mean, it's pretty incredible that anybody can do that. But Ripken did it. And he set the record on this day in 1995. It was a nationally televised game, so I had a chance to see it, like most of you. And it was just an amazing record that I don't think will ever be broken. I just don't see anybody touching it. Cal Ripken on this day in 1995. Enjoy your weekend. We'll come back on Sunday night. We're going to be talking to George Rodriguez about Texas, and our friend Alan Wall is joining us to talk about Mexico as well. Have a great weekend, everybody, and go Texas A&M, and go Rangers. Let's not forget the Rangers. Bye-bye, everybody.